This is the basic script for videotape number 6, practicing creating a master intervention. And in this tape I want to begin to introduce some of the categories of the development of thinking skills in the mind-brain complex that Fischer talks about. He has a chart with age ranges in it, beginning with 7 and 8-year-olds, going up to 21 to 23-year-olds. And I want to put down the basics of this. He does a number of charts in his studies that speak to these categories, and so this is just the beginning to get started, and we'll try to round it out with some of his other charts that might add more detail to it. The idea is to design activities that are specifically targeted toward minds at the following levels of the emergence of thinking skills. Please remember now, we're talking about when the ability to think begins to emerge in the mind-brain complex of a normal human being. Those who study and research with Fischer, and Fischer himself, begin with birth. But I haven't taken up my studies, although I'm familiar with it. My point of emphasis begins with 7 and 8-year-olds. Now, the reason for that was that I was very curious about what was going on that permitted the Lord to say, when they begin to become accountable before me, that they should be baptized, and that at that time they're capable of receiving the spiritual influence of the Holy Ghost. Now, looking at this in terms of the emergence of thinking skills, what's going on with a 7 or an 8-year-old person that makes this possible? How does the maturity of the mind-brain complex contribute to being able to think about things that have to do with the gospel? And so in 7 and 8-year-olds, the thing you need to keep in mind is that they are concrete thinkers. And so concrete examples are required. And we will be dealing with concrete and abstract a lot. But concrete is something that you can hold in your hand, something that you can see with your eyes. Even if it happens to be a story that you see in your mind's eye, it's a very concrete, literal object. Stories, words that represent tangible objects, connections describing the relations between concrete objects and ideas or stories. What this boils down to is, if you want to teach some of these religious things, I almost said principles, but we don't get into that for quite a while. If you want to teach some of these things, you need to draw on stories that illustrate the intellectual thing you're trying to get them to perceive. Now, in 11 and 12-year-olds, and it's so significant to me that now at age 11, the brethren are saying that young people can attend the temple and begin temple worship. Looking at it from my perspective of these domains of knowledge, it means that their mind-brain complex has matured to a point where they can think creatively about the things that are happening in the temple and their part in it. Just going back for a minute to 7 and 8-year-olds, one of the things that it seems to indicate why they're prepared to be baptized is that one of the things said of them is they are no longer the two words are centric, ethnocentric, and anyway, they are no longer stuck in the idea or frame of mind that the world rotates around me, it's all about me. No one else has any existence or importance or standing. It's just me. And then they get into a phrase where they can begin to allow for the fact that other people have feelings and needs and desires. And when they get to that stage, then they can truly begin to interact and work with people on a much wider basis. And so they can be sensitive, they can be sincere, they can be sympathetic, they can recognize kindness and unkindness, and just any number of things at the 7 or 8 year age level that would permit them to be accountable for their actions and choices in their disposition and actions towards others. Now moving on to 11 and 12-year-olds, says they have an emerging ability to combine concrete items and ideas into a single abstract category. Faith is an abstract label that can describe several concrete objects or ideas or stories. This may be well why the Lord taught in parables, giving concrete examples of very powerful abstract ideas. Just think about the Good Samaritan, for example, or any number of these. He was teaching a multitude of average and ordinary people who had not had the advanced training that the schoolmen of the time had, and their minds were not developed. It wasn't that they didn't have the capacity, but it just hadn't been awakened and actualized in their lives yet. And so this was his entry level. And this is very true with the 11 and 12-year-olds, taking a number of stories, examples, words, concepts, ideas. They can elaborate them into a single thing, saying these are examples of faith. So they're concrete, literal examples, but they're examples of an abstraction called faith. Now, one of the ways of getting your mind around this is to realize that a definition of an abstraction, in the way we're going to use it, is that it's something that's held in the mind. It can be pictured and held in the mind. And learning how to manipulate these things in the mind is part of the maturation process of the mind-brain complex. As the mind gets more complex, it's better able to hold concrete objects and ideas and mold them into a single abstraction. And at that age group, at that age, 12-year-olds, they can think about single abstractions. And you can introduce them to many abstractions. Various things: faith, loyalty, love. It's just an innumerable number of things that you can do by illustrating them with concrete examples. It's so important, such a powerful tool when you learn to do this deliberately and you begin to lay a foundation of abstract thought. emerging from concrete thinking. That helps them change and learn and grow in their minds to mature, to be able to use the capacity that they're getting. One of the things that we'll run into again and again is that the development of a human mind is a joint venture process between the person and the environment. Now, if the environment is not helping this person through this process, it doesn't happen. The human mind cannot pull itself up by its own bootstraps. And when you think about it, the whole plan of salvation is conceived around these ideas. We work together. We serve one another. We create organizations that nurture and teach and help us to achieve that capacity that the Lord is building into our minds. That's what makes, I hesitate to use the word teaching. I don't like it in the terms of the things that we're trying to talk about here. But that's why when you are creating an intervention, you need to take into thought and mind where the person is, what they're capable of doing. And if you're teaching abstract mappings or systems of systems to a 12-year-old, you're spinning your wheels, wasting your time, maybe doing more damage than you are good. It's the patient, careful building of the foundation. Somewhere else I said that parents were teaching their children 5,000 words before age 5. I ran across that again yesterday. It's 50,000 words that they're teaching their children by around age 5. Now, they won't be great, complex, abstract words, but just words that describe the world around them and help them to understand where they are oriented in life. So this needs to continue if you're dealing with 11 and 12-year-olds and you want them to come along with you. What is the statement? If you want someone to believe as you do, you must recreate for them, either vicariously or in real time, everything that has led you to believe as you do. And you can't do that with an 11 or 12-year-old. If you launch off into the wild blue yonder and start just throwing stuff at them without ever stopping to think about the concept learning sequence and the level of mental acuity required for them to truly understand what you're saying and believe as you do. We're going to come back to this time and again, and the whole purpose of this course of study is to make you a master interventionist, so that when you're dealing with a person, you can take all of these things and more into account before you ever open your mouth. And it's exciting, and it's powerful. And so I hope you'll stay with this. We're only laying a minimal basic foundation here to show the power of these categories. Now, going on to 14 and 15-year-olds, and this is a critical time in the development of young people's minds when so much begins to go awry. When I was teaching in junior high, most of the teachers wanted to teach ninth graders because ninth graders were leveled, even-minded, easy to deal with, whereas the seventh and especially the eighth graders, they were just coming off the walls. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're at a particular phase of the development of the mind-brain complex where they see things in a rather unusual way, and it knocks them for a loop. And if you aren't aware of what they're doing, you can't help them. You can aggravate them, and you can dislike them and think they're a pain, but you're not helping them to articulate their minds around this new thinking capacity which is emerging, and showing them a world that they just are not prepared for. They don't understand. Anyway, what's actually happening is 14 to 15-year-olds are able to map or compare point by point the aspects or parts of two different abstract concepts. Just take faith, for example. If you gave several concrete examples of faith, and then you wanted to give concrete examples of, just say, unfaithfulness, you could give stories of people who were unfaithful or in situations like that. And then invite these 14 and 50-year-olds to take one part of one abstraction and compare it to one concrete part of the other abstraction, and just to make a comparison or map point by point down through the process. And it works, but it's very fuzzy in terms of the insight it gives you, or your ability to manipulate and use these things in a practical and a useful way. One example, however, is to compare point by point the doctrine of the Antichrists and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And one of the scholars says there's hardly anything that can't be explained to younger minds if you choose the right format and don't try to do things that their minds can't comprehend. Now, one of the reasons that the person at this age gets upset is what they're doing is they're becoming aware of themselves, and then they're becoming aware of others. And they know their attributes, and they know the attributes of others, and they begin making comparisons, taking one of their attributes and comparing it to what they perceive to be the attribute of someone else. And it doesn't work well. They don't see themselves as they truly are, and they don't see things as they truly are, because they cannot hold in their mind more than the two attributes at a time. And those who've been talked to about these things say it's like a fog was lifted when they go to the next stage of mental maturation, because then things begin to make much better sense. And that's with the 17 and 18-year-olds, and they're dealing with abstractions in a different way. And we will come to that and describe it in one of the other examples of this model. And then there's another development that say takes place about age 21 to 23, and we will look at that a little bit also. One of the things that's so important to understand is these things, especially beyond age 17 or 18, if the environment is not involved in helping the person develop their mind-brain complex, it does not happen. The ability to deal with certain levels and types of abstractions, the capacity for it emerges, but the ability to use it does not, unless it's helped by the environment. Now you are the environment, and when you're designing your masterful interventions, you need to take into account not only what this person should be capable of according to the studies of the development of the mind-brain complex at their age, but you must also be aware of what has actually occurred to them individually in a unique and individual way. Where do they stand? What has been actualized? What kind of support have they received? in developing their mind and their capacity for thinking at this level. And in your instruction and your interaction with them, you've got to customize the things that you present. And that's where the power comes in doing your interventions, is that you can target so much more tightly. And my phone is nagging me that my time is up, so I'm going to pause this now and then